In 1996, Nancy and Dale Goodmestead purchased a dilapidated green-painted brick building along Baltimore Street on the southern edge of Gettysburg. Although it had sat abandoned for 30 years and had additions added to its western side, the oldest portion dated back to the 1860s. The mission was to restore the home to its original appearance and depict life in town during the most famous battle of the American Civil War. But peeling back the modern-day wallpaper and pulling up floorboards revealed a treasure trove of artifacts and a fascinating story that had been lost for over 100 years. The home was constructed for the family of George Shriver. He had come into some wealth by inheriting his father's distillery business 8 miles outside of town, selling some 60 acres of that farm to erect an upscale home for his family that consisted of his wife Hetty and 2 daughters, Sadie and Molly. Aside from giving them a comfortable living, George also envisioned running a saloon in the cellar. To attract crowds, a 2-lane bowling alley was built in the backyard. A garden for fresh berries, fruits, and vegetables was planted prior to construction. But just as the final pieces were being put together, the American Civil War commenced. In August of 1861, George enlisted in the Union Army, delaying the opening of the saloon till the war ended. Hetty would rely on the remaining savings to feed her daughters. At first, it didn't seem to be difficult, but the war went on from months to years. By 1863, the town was stricken with rumors of a Confederate invasion of Pennsylvania. Those rumors would be given confirmation when Confederate troops passed by Hetty's home on the 26th of June, then Union cavalry on June 30th. Finally, the battle touched off on the 1st of July on the northwest edge of town, as artillery and rifle fire shook the homes and businesses of the 2,400 citizens inside. Some felt the town would soon become unsafe and began fleeing. Hetty gathered her 2 daughters and knocked on the door of their neighbor, the Pierces, asking if they wanted their 15-year-old daughter, Tilly, taken with them to a safe place. The Pierces quickly agreed, promising to keep an eye on the Shrivers' home. Hetty's fears were valid as during the late afternoon, the Union line around the north end of town buckled. Vicious street-to-street fighting ensued as the Union were seemingly routed. Eventually, the retreat was halted on Cemetery Hill, where the Union line would reorganize and begin a fishhook formation to the south. It ended at the foot of the hills known as the Round Tops. Nearby was the farm of Jacob Weichert, where Hetty had taken the children to be safe. On July 2nd, they would be caught between the battle lines. Some of the worst fighting of the war transpired around them. Though they had left their home, it was not vacant. From his attic window, Mr. Pierce could see into the Shrivers' gantry. Confederate sharpshooters were moving inside, finding the south side to have a great view of Cemetery Hill. Mr. Pierce claimed to see one sharpshooter keel over to the floor, dead. John Rupp, another neighbor, later reported at least 2 Confederates were killed inside the Shrivers' gantry. Although the battle ended in a Union victory on July 3rd, Hetty and the children could not possibly leave the Weichert farm, which had become a field hospital. Uncertainty if the battle was truly over, and heavy rains kept Hetty bound to her parents' farm until July 7th. Returning home, they found Baltimore Street covered in the belongings of every household, including the Shrivers. While General Lee had ordered the Confederates not to harass people in homes, there was no rule on vacant ones. Hetty would find the south side of the home pelted with bullets, a red flag hanging over her front door, designated as a hospital. Inside, she would find her once well-groomed home ransacked in a condition that words cannot describe. Though Hetty would be able to repair the damages, it was taking a major dent into the savings George had left her. George was able to see his family for the first time in 2 years over Christmas of 1863, but he had to return to the front lines. Hetty would not hear word about him until he was listed as captured in January of 1864. George would die a prisoner of war at Andersonville Prison. The war would end in the spring of 1865, as did the last of the savings. Being at the 19th century, Hetty had little options to pursue except to sell the house in July of 1866. The bowling alley and saloon were never opened. When the Goodmesteads acquired the home, they knew little of this story. Hetty never left any personal account of the time in the home, but painstaking research, combing through records and other testimonies, as well as generous donations from descendants of the Shrivers, this story was at last able to be told. Once restoration finished, tours began in earnest in the early 2000s. A half-hour tour led by a costume guide takes you through all 4 levels of the home. Although no original furnishings survived from the days of the Shrivers, an inventory taken in 1860 allowed for the museum to purchase period original items that would have been in the home at the time of the battle. The attic now forever depicts what it may have looked like those first 3 days of July of 1863, with 2 Enfields leaning near the original loopholes knocked out by the Confederates, as well as torn cartridges littering the floor. Forensic work revealed 2 6-foot-wide pools of hemoglobin below the loopholes, confirming the deaths of the sharpshooters. The cellar now depicts the saloon that George dreamed of opening, a dream dashed by the bloodiest war in American history. When you hear about the Civil War, you imagine uniformed men lining up and taking shots. The aftermath is often neglected, but if there was one thing our guide wanted us to take away from our visit, it was the sight of the Shrivers' dining room and kitchen wrecked. This is what a Civil War looks like. If we forget these sights, we may very well be doomed to repeat them.